Letter 11. The Dera, April 2nd, 1933. Beloved Homeland Satsangis, these letters may be a little irregular in reaching you, but I am doing my best to get them to you as nearly on time as possible. This disciple is one busy boy here. I told the dear Master some days ago if he would give me 36 hours a day in which to work, I would be glad to put in more time in the study of the language and other things of minor importance. And let me say right here, in the very beginning of this letter, that every Satsangi in the world who has been so fortunate as to get Naam from our Master should consider it his primary aim, purpose, and business in life to go inside and take up the journey to higher regions. To that, everything else must be subordinated, even the making of a living. And if you make this your main objective in life, you need have no worries about business or other affairs. Do not forget that your Master is one with the Supreme Lord, and he will take care of you. A question often repeated. The writer of these letters has been asked the following question with so much persistency and urgency that it seems necessary to attempt an answer. It appears to belong in this series because the students of the Master are constantly confronted by this very question. They should be prepared to meet it, and it is our fondest hope to help remove every obstruction from the pathway of approach to the Master's holy feet. The question is, if the Christian religion is not of God and true in doctrine, how is it that that religion has developed so many noble, self-sacrificing characters in history and has also produced the highest civilization known on earth, while the several religions of India have done little, if anything, to elevate and liberate her people? Since the writer was once an authorized representative of the Christian religion, a graduate in its theology, but now is devoted to a faith originating in India, this question comes to him with special emphasis and force. It is a question that cannot be evaded. Let us then face the issue squarely. If the answer startles us, shocks us a little, let us bear in mind that progress, as well as safety, comes by facing the truth, and not by ducking our heads in the sand. Christian religion not taught by Jesus. In the 2nd and 3rd centuries of the Christian era, the religion as lived and taught by Jesus underwent many changes, going through a gradual process of crystallization into a formal religion and drifting away from the pure spiritual precepts as taught and much emphasized by the gentle Nazarene. When that process of crystallization was completed, the product was something very different from that which was taught and lived by the Master himself. So in this discussion, when reference is made to the Christian religion, this latter product is meant, and not the religion actually lived by Jesus. Let this fact be kept clearly in mind. It may avoid misunderstanding and prejudice. It will help us to get at the truth of the matter. When that religion finally emerged from its catacombs after the era of persecution was over, and was made the state religion by decree of the Emperor Constantine a little over 300 years from the date of the birth of Jesus, that process of crystallization, externalization, and formalization had reached its culmination. Up to that time, two powerful forces had been exerting their sinister influences upon the great body of Christian believers. One of them was priestcraft, and the other was absolute monarchism. Monarchism first persecuted it and then took it over as its darling child. In the meantime, that body itself had been remodelled out of all resemblance to its former self. Those dark and malign forces had for a long time stealthily but effectively concentrated in Egypt as their centre of operations. From there they invaded Rome. They first converted the Roman Republic into an absolute monarchy under the Caesars, and then the Egyptian priesthood slowly wound its tentacles about the new religion and finally absorbed it. When monarchism was finally seated upon the throne of almost universal empire, it espoused its twin sister, priestcraft, and from that incestuous union the universal church was born. The three were then merged into one body, and the politico-theological institution became the Catholic Church, with the Pope Emperor as its head. This new power, once thoroughly entrenched in Italy and adjacent territory, set about enlarging its powers by converting the world. It invaded Europe. Arius and others were sent out as missionaries. The scheme was extremely clever. First, let the priesthood bring the people under voluntary submission, and then the monarch will assume control. It was better than conquest by the sword. The Norsemen, the Anglo-Saxons, the Gauls, and nearly all of the Germanic peoples of Europe gradually came under the sway of the Pope. They found the field ready for the harvest, for the people of Europe had long ago drifted away from their ancient moorings. They had long ago forgotten the spirituality of their illustrious progenitors, and the pure, simple faith of earlier times had degenerated into a ceremonial formalism, having no virility or appeal to intelligence. They readily accepted the new system. The Pope became virtually the Emperor of Europe and the universal dictator. The principle of universal authority became dominant in Europe as opposed to individual rights. The Church was everything. The individual was nothing. The individual existed only for the benefit of the supreme organisation, which was now both Church and State. To more thoroughly establish its authority, it arrogated to itself divine powers and prerogatives. The Pope was a vice-regent of God on earth, and absolute submission to him was the supreme virtue. Rebellion against him was the arch-crime, and simultaneously with the inauguration of this universal power began the Dark Ages, which hung like the shadows of night over all Europe. Why the Dark Ages? The thoughtful student will ask, why the Dark Ages? Why should darkness supervene at the very moment when the Church had every chance to give light? If it were a divine agency, the moment was ripe for its supreme demonstration. It had a chance to open up an era of light such as the world had never known in this age, if it had been an agent of light itself. But the era of darkness set in at the very moment light should have dawned. Why this darkness? Note well the answer to this question, for therein lies the answer to our original query. Organised religion has never done anything to bring light into the world, to develop spirituality, or to establish and promote civilizations. Its entire genius and tendency lie exactly in the opposite direction. As soon as any religion is settled upon a people in organised form, with its priesthood in authority, it begins its deadly work of suppression, of subjugating reason to authority, of smothering the intellect, and of denying the right of individual thought and initiative. All progress ceases, and ritual and ceremony take the place of spontaneous worship. Innovation becomes a crime against society. Religion becomes a dead letter, and the priests grow fat. Such is the history of all formal religions, not alone the Christian religion. This fact is so well known to the student of history that examples need not be cited here. Organisation destroys religion. The primary evil lies in the very nature or fact of the organisation itself. There should be no attempt at organising religion. The death of the thing itself lies in the process of organising it. It is like encasing the entire body of a healthy man in a plaster of Paris cast. It is like trying to build a cage around an eagle. It is analogous to trying to organise a science like chemistry, for example, and then building up about it a set of fixed dogmas and a priesthood to teach and interpret it. The science itself would be killed by that very process. Organised religion exerts the same destructive influence upon true spirituality. Organised religion and priestcraft are essentially one and the same thing, even in its most liberal Protestant form. If any think otherwise, they only deceive themselves. Spiritual religion, a true science. But religion or spirituality, as taught and practiced by the masters, is something vitally different. It is a free and exact science. It is subject to the same analysis and demonstration as any other science. It is controlled by laws of nature, just as rigid and universal in their operation. Its methods are as exact and its results as uniform as in any science known. The fact that the spiritual work of the masters is an exact science is quite difficult for Western students to grasp, accustomed as they are to think of religion as a bundle of vague theories and beliefs. Yet the lack of scientific value in those theories and beliefs is the main thing that is now forcing the majority of Western college men and women to discard all religion. Their intelligence is forcing them to give up the old, and they have not yet found anything better. But the spiritual master's position is exactly like that of any master of science in his laboratory. Only the master is more than a teacher. There comes a time in the course of each student's demonstration in spiritual science when steep and rugged mountains must be climbed, even the dizziest heights. Then he needs not only an experienced guide, but the strong right hand of that guide must support him in places where he could never make the grade alone. Then it is that the value and absolute necessity of the living master is fully realized. Then it is that the great love of the pupil for his master is born. Though the master has all knowledge and all power at his command, and the pupil may submit himself wholly to the will of the master, yet the master never imposes any authority or restraint upon his pupil. There is one other point in this spiritual science which is apt to be overlooked. That is the fact that morality itself must be made the actual foundation for the superstructure of scientific spirituality. For this reason, all masters insist that the very first step of the aspirant must be to subdue all passions and regulate his life according to the strictest rules of good behaviour. He can make no progress spiritually until this is done. This is one thing that distinguishes the Master and his disciples from all others. They have perfect self-control, and their characters are perfect, assuming that they have really advanced on the path. Upon this foundation, all of their spirituality and their higher powers are built. Organized religion deceives itself. There is one thing in organized religion that shows it to be an extremely clever design of the negative power, viz., while it is actually the world's worst enemy to enlightened progress, it firmly believes itself to be the greatest friend and promoter of civilization. Besides, it instantly seeks the destruction of anyone who dares challenge its claim to beneficence. But to those who know, this very fact stamps it as an agent of the destructive forces. Truth, righteousness, and goodness never persecute their enemies. They seek only the good of all, at all times and by all means. They win by love and by their own innate values. You cannot imagine a master fighting or persecuting anyone. He is just as gracious to an opponent as to a disciple. His love is universal, impartial, and his light is like that of the sun. It shines alike upon the just and the unjust. But of course, the one who opens his heart to it gets the full benefit by it. Only error, feeling its own weaknesses, fights for its existence. And by that very sign, all men, if they were observant, would know that it was error. That is one of the infallible indices of the forces of the negative power, and by that you may always locate them. The original question answered. We are now ready to answer fully the question we started out with. It is this: the Christian religion has never developed noble, intelligent, and self-sacrificing characters, and it has never produced any high civilizations. Neither has any other organized religion. As said before, their tendencies all lie in the opposite direction. The assumption that the various religions have done so much for the world is only an egotistical claim of their champions. As a matter of fact, they have all been an unmitigated misfortune, and each in its turn has left civilization in a worse state than it found it. If this comes as a shock to some, it is nevertheless better to face the truth and boldly seek the remedy. If you give unbiased study to the question, you cannot fail to see the truth of the above statement. The term Christian religion must always be understood in its legitimate historical sense as an organized institution. It must never be confused with Jesus and his personal life and teachings. From the day that it became an organized power, it has acted as all other organized religious bodies have done, to enslave the minds of men. It has smothered the growth of spirituality, even as weeds choke the fruitful plant in the garden. It has stunted individual growth and development, and it has done its damnedest to prevent all scientific discovery and increase of knowledge. Many noble Christian characters. Some of my readers will be ready with numerous examples of noble men and women in the Christian faith who have served mankind with unexampled heroism, some of whom were priests and ministers of the Church itself. Yes, the fact is cheerfully admitted, and it goes down in history to their credit that they did so, usually, in spite of their church or by its reluctant and forced consent. Besides, it should always be borne in mind that their spirituality and heroism derived its inspiration not from the Church, but direct from the divine inner light. It is a most gracious manifestation of divine providence that among all religions and in all ages there have been many individuals whose love of God and man cannot be questioned, but the beautiful flowering of their spirituality has generally been in spite of the stultifying influence of the organisation to which they belonged. So long as men say and do things to exalt the priesthood and support their doctrines, they receive the plaudits of the Church. Well done, good and faithful servants. But the moment that anything to the contrary is even hinted at, the offender becomes anathema, and in former times the thumbscrews, the dungeon, and the stake awaited him. A great modern school. Modern missionary enterprises, the building of schools, and many other philanthropic endeavours in the name of organised religion have usually been inspired by a peculiar mixture of fanatical church propaganda, together with individual spirituality and love of humanity. Sometimes the one factor predominates, and sometimes the other. As an example of the latter, we may cite a great modern institution of learning, much loved by this writer. To it he is greatly indebted. It is located in the city of Chicago, and is one of a half-dozen of the world's greatest universities, the University of Chicago. Although only about 40 years of age, its great light shines to the ends of the earth, and it has made for itself a unique position in history. Many thinking minds have been awakened to independent thought within its blessed halls. It was founded, promoted, and its work has been carried on mostly by men connected with a certain religious denomination. This church takes all the credit for the institution when someone points to its noble achievements. And yet the orthodox body of that very church has never ceased to criticise and condemn it, because its faculty of free to think independently and to express their findings. They would utterly destroy it if they could, but happily that power lies not in their hands. The great work of this institution has been carried on by men in whom the very flower of modern civilization has reached its highest expression in spite of the hamper of the church to which they belonged. Long may it live to spread its light among the nations. A civilization without churches. The question is often asked, where would the world be today if it had not been for the church? The answer is, it would probably be much further advanced in everything that makes for general enlightenment and happiness. Do not take this as a personal insult if you happen to be a devotee of the church. You cannot help it. You have been only one of millions who have supported the idea of the beneficence of the church, under the delusion that all civilization was to be credited to the church, when as a matter of fact it has made what headway it has made, usually against the opposition of the church. If in the last 200 years certain Protestant bodies have exerted some influence in favour of civilized policies, that does not affect the truth, so well established by history that the influence of the church in the main has been on the other side. The flame of individual spirituality has ever burned in the souls of noble men and women the world over. These divine flames have often fed and kept alive the organisation to which they belonged, but much to the detriment of the individual. If only these individual flames had been left free to shine out into the world's darkness, unobscured by the dark and sinister robes of the priesthood, their holy light would long ago have illuminated the world. The fatal discrepancy. Let us now call special attention to one fatal discrepancy in the logic of those who propound this question. It has already been touched upon. They assume that the religion with which their heroes were connected should be given full credit for all that those heroes did, whereas in fact their major deeds of heroism and service to humanity were generally done in spite of their religion, and often they died as martyrs at the hands of their religious leaders. Throughout history, noble men and women have arisen here and there, not only among the ranks of the Christian faith, but from all religions, the Muslim, the Buddhist, the Hindu, Zoroastrian and Confucian, besides other smaller bodies. Those great souls, nourishing a genuine spirituality born of a close personal relationship with God, rose to heights of splendid achievement. From all organizations have come men and women who became the world's benefactors in science, invention, in public charities, and even in religion itself. But they derived their inspiration not from the organized religion to which they belonged, but from the inner light which knows no race, creed, time, or organization. Many of these noble men actually believed that their religion should have all the credit. They forgot the patent fact that their religions have also fostered wars, civil and international, race hatreds, strifes, and contentions without number. They overlooked the terrible tragedy of one nation at the throat of another, both professing the same religion, and each side calling on their God to overthrow the other side. How often that has actually happened in history. How amazingly that phenomenon was thrust into our faces during the last Great War. When the debits and credits of all organized religions have been counted up and a balance sheet printed, it will certainly be found that the debit side is much heavier. The great saints of all ages, including Jesus himself, have generally suffered martyrdom at the hands of the established religion in which they were born. If not that, then at the hands of some rival religion. Glowing with the fires of inspiration within themselves, they set about their work, only to fall victim to the bigotry and prejudice of the organization. But finally, when the world at large proclaims some of these men as heroes and benefactors in spite of organized religion, then the Church faces about and brazenly replies, "Yes, just see what we produced." The holy flames lighted. When the world is lulled to sleep and stagnation by formal religions, then the Supreme Father lights the holy flames anew in the hearts of his advanced sons, in whatever time or land his divine wisdom sees fit. Thus came the great Renaissance in Europe and the awakening in India at about the same time, under the gracious ministry of Kabir Sahib, Guru Nanak and Tulsidas, and in Persia through the influence of Maulana Rum and Shamsi Tabriz. A little later, the same influence was at work in England and America through the ministry of the Wesleys, and then came the great light of the Sage of Concord, followed by the Unitarian and Congregational factors of liberation. These holy men drew their inspiration from within, and their work was the flowering of the living spirit, rising above the cesspools of human slavery and ignorance, even as the sacred lotus puts forth its blossom above the stagnant waters. Reformation after reformation have come in many ages. Men have to be dragged out of the mire of superstition into which formal religion leads them, and they have to be cleansed and taught anew that the source of all genuine religion or spirituality is within and not without. It still remains a tragic fact that the chief cause of spiritual and moral degeneration and the wane of spirituality among all peoples and in all ages has been organised religion. Again at the Master's feet. We are now again at the feet of the Master where we started. We have seen that organised religion is not the friend, but the enemy of mankind. It does not produce high civilizations, but it destroys them. It does not develop noble characters, but it tries to subdue and suppress individual initiative. It does not disseminate knowledge, but it does its best to close all avenues of knowledge, lest that knowledge might upset its dogmas and disrobe its priests. Of course, organised religions have done nothing to liberate and uplift the people of India. They are, on the contrary, the very cause of the degraded condition of masses of people in India. Here, as elsewhere, religion in the hands of the priesthood has thrown the halter over the heads of the millions, and the priests have continued to ride them as they would other beasts of burden. So long as priesthood endures, mental and moral slavery will endure. What have the Masters done? And the Masters? You ask what they have done for the people? The Masters have done much that has never been written in history and cannot be written, but no apology is needed for them. If it were so, this writer is not worthy to undertake such an apology, but he may venture a word or two in explanation, so that the earnest student may better understand the situation and his path to the Master not be blocked by misunderstanding. The Masters are now and have always been very few in number, while there are 350 million people in India. It is extremely difficult for the Masters in the physical body to reach any considerable number of the people, and if they were reached, they are not capable of listening to the appeal of the Masters. There are people right here in less than a mile of our great Master, who have lived here by him for 30 years, have seen him going and coming through their villages during all of these years, and yet they do not know that he is a Master, and if anyone should tell them that he is, they would probably pay not the slightest heed to it. Many of them do not even know what a Master is. It is all beyond their comprehension. Masters follow the supreme will. The Masters do not find it consistent with the will of the Supreme Father to use extraordinary powers to upset the usual routine of life and set in motion novel reforms. The Masters understand that the will of the Supreme is being carried out among the people, so they are content to let the Supreme Father manage the world in his own way, and they themselves obey with loving submission whatever the Father directs them to do. The management of the world may not suit us, but evidently suits the one who is doing the managing. So we had best leave it at that. The Masters look upon the drama of human life from a vastly higher point of view than most of us, and so they understand it better. They are not in such a hurry as we are to work revolutionary changes. They accept the principle that the Supreme Father is already doing the best that can be done for the people under the circumstances. The Masters extremely busy. The Masters are extremely busy men, working generally more than 20 hours out of the 24. They do not require as much sleep as most others. Our Master here sleeps only about 3 hours per day, a good part of the time. The rest of the time they are obliged to attend to the requirements of the physical body and to carry on the Supreme Father's work. They do all that lies in the power of men or gods to help the people. But spiritually, the great majority cannot be reached or helped to any appreciable degree. They must first rise to higher levels of evolution by their own unaided efforts. The Master does not pick a man up by force and transform him. It is always a matter of voluntary individual effort. It is a fundamental principle that all self-improvement must come from within and must be due to voluntary individual effort and initiative. Physical improvements. As to the improvement of physical conditions, that also must be left to the people themselves. Improvement cannot be thrust upon them against their own will and without their cooperation. One of the most fundamental principles upon which the Masters have always insisted is that each individual's will must be left free to act independently and upon its own initiative. Only in that way can development take place. It has always been the working principle of the Masters. One other point may be mentioned here which may not be so easy for the Western student to grasp. The Masters are not much interested in trying to improve worldly conditions. They pay but little attention to secular education or to the establishing of material benefits for the masses. At first, this statement is rather startling. It may seem to nullify all that a Master is supposed to stand for. We are so accustomed to think that the greater a man is, the more he is interested in every phase of human welfare. We are also accustomed to think of material benefits as matters of primary concern in this life, but the Masters think primarily of spiritual benefits. To that all else is subordinated. It is true that the saints love all mankind with an abiding affection that the world can never understand, and there is nothing in the world that lies in their power to do for humanity, which they would for a moment neglect. But, as said before, they look upon the drama of human life from a much higher viewpoint than that of other men, and so they know better than others what makes for the final betterment of all, and to that they give their undivided attention. Permanent improvement impossible. The Masters know that no permanent improvement can ever be made in the material conditions under which human life is carried on in this world. Conditions improve or worsen with changing ages, but no immediate and rapid changes can be effected. Each age has its prevailing conditions of material existence. Those conditions cannot be modified to any great extent. The more one meddles in affairs of that sort, the more troubles he runs into, and the less good he accomplishes. If he changes one thing for the better, something else is worse. The present lot of mankind, in every country and among every people, is exactly what has been ordered by the Supreme Will. If it were not so, the only logical conclusion would be that the Creator has abandoned the job which he undertook at the time of creation, and has turned it over to the people themselves, or to the devil to do the best they could with a bad situation. But such a thought is quite inconceivable to one who accepts the major premise of a benevolent and omnipotent Supreme Being. Saints do not wish to interfere with the working out of that supreme will. But when the time arrives that people themselves take up the improvement of their material conditions, it means the supreme will has brought them up to the proper time for such a change. In the second place, if this material life could be so greatly improved that disease and pain and sorrow and poverty could be eliminated, and all men made happy in the enjoyment of long life and prosperity, just in proportion as that was done, men would lose interest in spiritual things, forget God and their eternal home, and settle down to a contented sojourn here for countless ages to come. But that is just what the Supreme Father and the Master do not want. They want to take souls out of this region as fast as they are fit and take them back to their original home. That is the mission of the Masters, and if pain and sorrow are needed to drive men to their feet, they look upon that pain and sorrow as a godsend, even though the individual may regard it as a great hardship. Again at the Master's feet. And so we arrive again at the holy feet of the Master. The Master's work is unique. They organize no church. They establish no authority to cramp the initiative of the individual. They give out light to guide all who can see that light, and they lend their strong hand to support the weak who are willing to lean upon them. No external organization is needed. Such organization only serves to draw the attention downward and outward, while the student should center his attention inward and upward. The Master's kind and potent assistance is all that he needs. Any interference from an external organization detracts from the path and leads the soul back to darkness. Affectionately yours at the Master's feet, Julian P. Johnson.